Welcome back to another video. This is the Southpaw Predictions, and today we're going to be discussing President Trump's best case scenario. So, in my last video, I done the 2020 presidential election between President Trump and Joe Biden. If you have not checked that out, please go check it out. Give it a like, thumbs up, subscribe. Today we're going to be discussing President Trump's best case scenario. This is not the likeliest scenario, but I'm going to be doing it for both candidates. And before we do my prediction, I'm going to talk a little bit about the factors that leads to the best case scenario. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the economy. In the beginning of the year, the economy was quite strong, um, but then COVID happened, as you guys all know, and then local governments, state governments decided to shut things down, but it has recovered. Dow Jones Industrial Average, which is the top 30 companies in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, they took a beating in mid-March and then they recovered. They basically eliminated all of their losses. S&P 500, the 500 largest companies, same thing. It's almost exactly the same thing. So President Trump's going to have to hammer the fact that the economy is recovering, but that's Wall Street. What is that? What about Main Street? Well, if you take a look, we're going to take a look at New York City, for example. New York City is pretty bad right now in terms of small businesses. A lot of restaurants are closing. Um, there are talks that Cuomo might have to reinstate locking down again. Big box stores like Target, J.C. Penney's, there's it's not profitable here in New York City, considering the fact that one, it's expensive, and two, these local and state regulations that prohibit businesses. If you go down Manhattan, you can't even eat indoors. You have to eat out. It's only available outdoors. It's getting so bad that a lot of restaurants, something like 60-70% of restaurants are closing. It's pretty insane. But Trump has to hammer the idea of federalism, that this isn't his responsibility, that this is more so to do with Governor Cuomo and Mayor Bill de Blasio, who has done an absolutely horrendous job in keeping the economies afloat. Um, but that's not to say that it's all bad, because at the end of the day, restaurants they're they're coming back, but it won't be for long. I mean, they just opened the gyms. I think he's just going to have to hammer the idea that, listen, if you vote for these people, your business is going to stink. And you see the Democrats flipping this into it's his fault for not doing anything about COVID. Next up, we have social issues. Trump. It is no surprise that Trump is not a very good speaker when it comes to this. He sometimes goes over the line, but that's not to say that he says what's on everyone's mind. If you look at the Cato Institute, I've hinted at this at my last video. 62% of Americans say they have political views they're afraid to share. 50% of strong liberals support firing Trump donors, and 36% of strong conservatives support firing Biden donors. So it exists on both sides, but at the end of the day, Trump is the only one bringing light to this. He really has nothing to lose when he says his opinions on stuff like this. I am a strong proponent to cancel culture. I think he's done a mistake with boycotting Goodyear tires. I don't agree with what Goodyear did, but if they make a cheaper tire, they make a cheaper tire, and I think cancel culture works both ways. But but on social issues, Trump has to hammer the fact that left culture means cancel culture. Left culture means if you don't agree with me, you're a racist, and they claim to be anti-racist. So if you don't participate with me, you're an anti-racist. And another issue is Black Lives Matter. I think we've definitely seen on the streets that it's becoming a pretty big problem. Antifa, I mean, these guys are actually criminals. I mean, they can go out, commit crimes. You wouldn't even be able to tell who they are. It's getting so bad that you have 17-year-olds defending the street. I mean, it really is a bad time, a bad culture. Trump has to hammer the fact that this is something that Democrats support. None of the mainstream Democrats even denounce any of these actions, with the exception of Joe Biden, who just recently came out and denounced violence. But even then, that doesn't feel genuine. You got to take into account that Joe Biden's only doing this because his poll numbers are tanking. And even Don Lemon saying this, it's it's not a good it's not a good atmosphere here in the United States. But he has to hammer the fact that this is not what he wanted. And again, the idea of federalism comes up when you talk about this. People say, well, this is Trump's America. Yeah, that's true, but Portland is a Democratic city, and Trump only has jurisdiction over federal properties such as the courthouse and a number of other buildings, but he can't really do anything about this unless the local and state governments step up. And next, we have the final factor that will lead to President Trump's best case scenario, and that's Joe Biden. Now look, Joe Biden is possibly the worst candidate the Democrats could have put up in 2020. It's basically an FU to the Bernie Bros and the hard left, because Biden does not generate excitement. He does not generate turnout, um, and frankly, he's just milquetoast. He doesn't really offer anything. I think the idea of bringing Kamala Harris to the vice presidential ticket, it may help with some demographics in California, New York, but if you go to these swing states such as Wisconsin, um, Florida, all of these swing states, they're going to see that, well, she's not really denouncing anything of Black Lives Matter, so why should we even vote for this guy? I mean, basically Kamala Harris is the next president. Joe Biden is going to be sitting in the White House basement, doing the thing he's doing to this woman in this picture. Kamala Harris is the next president if you vote for Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a puppet. Alright, so now that we're at the Electoral College map, I went ahead and filled out the safe states for both parties. You may have noticed that I left out Washington and New York and Oregon as not safe for the Democrats, and that's because, like my last video, safe is something I would categorize as 10 plus, but I just don't think these riots are gonna help Joe Biden or the Democrats garner the independent and the moderate votes. So I'm going to go ahead and, since this is Trump's best case scenario, I think the Democrats are going to take New York by a likely margin. Same thing with Washington. Washington could potentially get closer. You have to keep in mind, Washington is it's basically Seattle. That's where all of your votes are. Spokane and other cities in Washington, they're pretty conservative. Yes, in fact, Spokane, it went to the president by over 10,000 votes. It's pretty insane. Oregon, I'm going to categorize as tilt, just because the riots, it's not going to galvanize a lot of support for the Democrats. Um, and also, you have to take into consideration that Oregon it's not doing so well right now. In terms of COVID, they're seeing that businesses are being shut. Oregon is just there's a lot of tornadoes hitting at the same time. Same thing with Illinois. I think Illinois is. I'm gonna go ahead and say it's a likely state. Chicago Mayor Lightfoot of Chicago. I think that's the mayor. She's done an absolutely horrendous job containing the streets of Chicago, and I think Illinois is seeing an exodus. A lot of people are leaving the state. I think moderates and even independents are saying, listen, I'm not going to vote for these people. Illinois possibly could potentially be in play in the next decades to come, but as for now, we're going to leave it in the likely column. Colorado, I think in the best case scenario, I think it's a tilt. I think also Cory Gardner can retain his seat. Same thing with New Mexico. It's tilt. I think Trump could potentially flip this state. if because it's just not a good state to be in. It's very dangerous, close to the border. Highest rates of homicide in the whole country. Not a good place. I'm also going to I'm going to characterize Iowa and Ohio as a safe state in Trump's best case scenario. These are states that are drifting away from the Democratic Party for some time. Went to Obama in 2008, but I think it's going to go back. In Trump's best case scenario, I think he narrowly takes Virginia. Back in 2016, it was pretty close. If I was watching the CNN um, coverage of this, and it looked awfully close in the throughout the night. I think in his best case scenario, he'll flip Virginia. It was a ruby red state before Obama came in, but now that you have a lot of people moving into the state and bringing their beliefs with them, it's very possible that Virginia could potentially go back to the Republicans in this scenario. I'm gonna move Texas to the safe column. I think a lot of people are seeing that Texas has some good policies, and with that, Texas is gonna galvanize the Trump support, the moderate liberals who feel disenfranchised by where the party's going, and the independents. You have to also keep in mind that Governor Greg Abbott, won the Hispanic vote, so it's entirely possible that he can win it with a safe margin. Same thing with Georgia, and same thing with North Carolina. I'm gonna categorize this as likely just because there's more there's a lot of demographic change happening right now. I don't see it as a safe state, even in his best case scenario. But in his best case scenario, I do see it as a likely state. Same thing, Florida, I would categorize as lean, as is Arizona. I think Nevada would also be lean in his best case scenario. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan would be tilt. I just don't see Michigan. Um, I don't see him winning with a comfortable margin in Michigan. Pennsylvania, I do see him winning with a lean margin. It is one of the states that is seeing registration for Republicans outpace the Democrats. New Hampshire, he takes it by a tilt margin. Um, I don't think the whole state of Maine will go to Trump even in his best case scenario, but I do think the second congressional district will be safe. And I think the first congressional district will be likely. A lot of liberals in those areas. In the best case scenario for Nebraska's third congressional district, I would categorize this as lean, and this would be President Trump's best case scenario. So as always, like, comment, subscribe, leave your opinions below. I will try to respond to every comment. Have a good day.